another story that really moving was the story of James Brightmore, who was a young man who had already served a number of months imprisonment for disobeying orders as a conscientious objector, but he was now given solitary confinement, and the commanding officer of his regiment was informed that there were no cells available because they were all full of other soldiers or conscientious objectors. So, this was a hassled commanding officer, and he said, well, we'll dig a pit if necessary. And the soldiers and officers took him at his word and dug a pit, a 10 feet deep pit, and put James Brightmore, this young man, inside for the best part of a week. And he was standing on 2 wooden planks. Now, what happens in a lot of these situations is, soldiers are human, and very often they would sympathise with conscientious objectors being, overtly treated harshly. Unfortunately, there was a friendly soldier who dropped down a cigarette packet and a pencil stub to James Brightmore down in the pit. And so Brightmore was able to write a letter home. The soldier took the cigarette packet and addressed it to his family. And once the family got the news that their son was in this pit, they sent the story to the Guardian, the Manchester Guardian as was then. The Guardian printed the story. The newspaper ended up on the commanding officer's desk, who of course said, we better get that chap out of the pit and cover up the pit and cover all signs of the fact there was a... And Brightmore, it's hard to imagine what it must have been like being in that pit for a week. Possibly the most distressing story I came across was a young man called Jack Gray, conscientious objector again, who was submitted to all kinds of brutality and harshness by his sergeants, sergeant majors and fellow soldiers. He was made to carry a suitcase of stones at one point and march. A live grenade was thrown at his feet to try and sort of, get him to move and march. He was beaten constantly. On one occasion, a rope was tied around his middle, and he was dragged around a field. And every time he fell down, he was dragged to his feet and then dragged on again. And then, as if that wasn't enough, they tied a rope around they stripped him naked, tied a rope around him and dragged him to a pond within the camp and dropped him in and then pulled him out. Now, they didn't do this just once, they did this 8 or 9 times, said a witness who saw this. And the pond was full of sewage. And as a result of that, Jack Gray gave in and said, you win. Okay, I'll become a soldier. And who can blame him? I mean, if that happened to me, goodness, I can't imagine. And it's just terribly moving that the only way you can get someone to comply is by those kinds of brutal, inhumane methods. I mean, there were soldiers there who refused to take part in that, but there were those that did carry it out. Terribly shocking to consider these stories.
Perfect.